In today's video, we'll talk about the filter array method. And what is that is very simple. It's just filters an array based on a certain condition. So how can we use this? Well, here I have an array, right, with 4 numbers, and I'm just printing out the array on the console. If I try to run this, you'll notice simple enough, I get the array on the screen. So if we try to filter it, let's say array.filter, and this filter function actually takes in first a callback. So this let's start with an anonymous function here. So we can say anonymous function and then that. And this function is called for every single element of the array. So the first parameter is always going to be our, well, whatever element we're on. So let's just say lm. So the callback function has to either return true or false. True if we want to keep the element, or false if we don't want to keep it, we want to filter it. So let's say we want to filter every single element that is higher than 0, that is a positive number. In our case, what we would have to do is just return whether or not lm is higher than 0, right? If it's higher than 0, we keep it. If it's less than 0 or equal, we don't keep it. So let's just say higher or equal in this case. Okay, and well, since we call it, of course, if we console log this array, we're gonna see the changes on our screen here. Well, as you notice, nothing changed. Surprisingly enough, but why is that? That is actually because filter doesn't modify our array. All it does is iterate over our array and create a new one based on the elements that our function, our callback function, returned true on, right? So if we say here let result equals array.filter and actually print both our original array and result here. So if I try to run this now, you'll notice the first one is our original array, which has the negative number, and the second one is our other array, which is a completely new one, right? And doesn't have any number that is less than 0. So like most other array methods that iterate over an array and call a callback function, you actually can add more than just one parameter to the callback function. You can actually add as a second parameter the index. You can say here index, and the third parameter is going to be our, well, our array, like the array that we're iterating over. So you can say just, I don't know, inner array, right? And this is going to be the same one as the one we're iterating over. So we can actually create a condition based on, for example, our index. You can say, okay, return element is higher and equal than 0 and index, let's say %2 is actually 0. So only the numbers at even indices are going to be on the new array. So if I try to run this now, you'll notice I only get 20 and 800. So I don't get -12 because it's less than 0, and I don't get 72 because it's index. Well, guess what? It's actually 3. And this condition is false, right? So this is how you can actually get the index inside the filter function. That can be useful in some specific cases. Another interesting feature that has been implemented to most of these functions, these array methods, is the control of the this parameter. So the this, or the this really keyword. So here, if I try to console log this, in our case, it's going to be something very random. So we're going to get probably the context of execution for a generic node program in our case, but it doesn't really matter, it's just something very random. But we can actually pass in as the second parameter to our filter call. So what's the second parameter to our filter call? Well, which one is the first? The first one is actually our function, right, like so. So the second one is going to go right over here. And we can pass here, for example, we can say, let's give it our array. So in our case, if we give it our array as our this parameter, this console log is going to actually print our, well, array. So let's actually run this now. As you'll notice, I get, well, our array printed on the screen multiple times because it was, this callback function is executed for every single element of the array, right? So we got it 4 times and then once at the end here. That's why we get it 5 times on the console, right? So it makes sense. This can sometimes come in useful. Now, last optimization that I very often do when using the filter array method is actually, instead of using an anonymous function like I do here, just use an arrow function. So let's go back to the first example, right? So we didn't have a console log and we didn't have a condition or our index, right? So then we don't need these extra parameters. And we also don't need our array. So now it's just a simple function, right? It has one parameter, it has one instruction, and that instruction is also returned, is the result of that callback function. So we can translate that in a very compact way using the arrow function notation. So instead of saying function, we just kind of remove the keyword. We remove the parentheses because we only have one single variable. We add an arrow here, and this is already valid. This is already a valid arrow function, but we don't actually need the bracket since we only have just one instruction in our arrow function. So we can just remove this and simply remove the return statement, and there you go. This is basically the same as our initial example, right? We just have a filter over our initial array that all it does is filter out every single element that is less than 0. So if I try to now run this, after I clear the screen, you'll notice I get the same result as we initially seen. And of course, you can actually use the filter array method to filter out an array of objects. So let's say we have here an array with 3 objects, and we want to actually filter out every single object that is, let's say, its age is higher than 50. So what we can do here is, instead of lm is higher or equal than 0, we can say lm.age is less than 50. So if it's less than 50, we keep it in our result array. So if I try to run this now, you'll notice I get, well, these 3 are actually the initial array since we're printing that out on the screen, noted by the square brackets here. And the second one is actually our result array after we have filtered all of them out. And as you can see, we only got just one single object. So this also works well with arrays of objects or even larger structures such as arrays of objects that have values as another arrays, and you have to check inside those as well. That can lead to a really short amount of code using this filter method to get the resulting array. Okay, so I hope this video has helped you. If you have any questions about the filter method or on any other method, really, leave them down in the comments below or on our Discord server. Thank you guys so much for watching, and well, take care. See ya.